Welcome to Griptape Nodes. Griptape is an AI orchestration platform built specifically for high-end media production. Whether you're a technical director building custom tools for the team, or an artist iterating creatively, Griptape bridges the gap between AI and traditional VFX workflows, so you can build and experiment in a secure space and enhance your pipeline. In this video, we're going to cover the UI basics, the core concepts, and how to build your first workflow. If you haven't yet downloaded Griptape, then head to our installation guide video linked in the description to get up and running first. When you first launch Griptape, you'll see this window with workflow examples that you can open to get an idea of how different workflows can be structured, or you can use them as templates to create new workflows. You'll also see any workflows that you've created and saved to your workspace here as well. And if you have any workflows that are outside of your workspace, maybe that you downloaded from somewhere, then you can import them so they can be accessed from here too. And of course, you can create a new blank workflow to start from scratch. So let's dive into the UI. The main area that you see is the canvas. This is an intuitive drag and drop visual interface where you can build up your workflows. On the left, we have the node sidebar. This is where your node libraries live, organized into categories like agents, images, text, and so on. You can also find any custom node libraries in the Libraries tab, which organizes the nodes by which library they belong to rather than in one big list of everything. For nodes that you use a lot, you can drag and drop them to this favorite section at the top of the sidebar for easy access, so they always stay at the top. We also have this Refresh Libraries button and a quick access to the library settings where you can register new libraries and then refresh to update them if they haven't updated automatically. We have a video on how to manage and install additional node libraries, also linked in the description, so definitely check that out if you'd like more information on that. You can toggle the light and dark mode from here as well. And lastly, on this sidebar is the usage credits, where you can add credits to your account, change your subscription type, see the pricing for running various nodes, and also see your usage history for nodes that have cost to run. And you can click on the Griptape Nodes logo at the top to bring back that workflow window at any point. On the right, we have a sidebar with a few different panels. There's a number of things you can do here. First, we have this chat panel, and this is basically an integrated AI assistant that you can use to start threads to experiment and iterate independently from the node network. For example, I could ask it to write me an image generation prompt for a sunset landscape, and the response will be that prompt. And then I can ask it to generate an image using the previous prompt, and it will give me the result, which I can then iterate on and drag into the node network when I'm happy with it. So you can see it works in a similar way as AI chatbots, with the purpose of giving you somewhere to work and experiment without needing to build everything inside the node graph. You can choose what models are being used for the text and image generation. And if you have any MCP servers configured, you'll be able to choose a server here, and then you can interact directly with external tools like DCCs or USD data, for example. We also have the script editor tab in this panel, so everything you do in Griptape Nodes has a corresponding Python command which is logged here. So anytime you create a node or make a parameter change, it'll appear here in the command history. And you can also type any Python script and run it here. So everything you can do in the node editor is also available through Python. Then we have the execution log. This will log any information, errors, warnings, and so on from your workflow, and the different visibility options and filters make it really easy to debug and find exactly what you need. Finally, in this panel, we have the node properties. So as well as accessing the node properties on the node itself, you can also access a selected node's properties from here, as well as toggle the visibility of individual parameters, so you can control exactly what needs to be visible on the node itself, keeping things nice and tidy. There's other things you can do here, like editing a parameter's display name or even adding new parameters, all with the purpose of allowing you the customization options that you need. Before we jump into the workflow basics, I just want to cover the other key UI elements. So on the bottom bar, there are some useful links to documentation, GitHub, and other resources, and you can also bring up the hotkeys to view whenever you need them. On the top bar, we have the usual file menu options. We also have the Manage menu, which has the model, library, engine, and project management options for setting up new models and libraries and managing your projects and connections to engines. And then in the settings, there's various different options for customizing your workspace and setup. I'm not going to go into all of these different options in the video, but you can explore these in your own time. And then we have some buttons for running your workflows. So running the entire workflow, running just the selected node, running from the selected node, and then stopping any currently running nodes. I'll go into more detail about these when we have a workflow to run. And finally, we have the engine information, our error history, and the publish options. So inside the publish menu, you can choose to run the workflow through the terminal, which will generate the exact command line string needed to run your workflow. You can also package your workflow and all of its dependencies to a directory or to the cloud using the publish options here. This makes it really easy to share your workflows with your team. If you've loaded the Nuke Nodes library, then you'll also have the option to publish the workflow directly as a Nuke gizmo, so you can use it straight away inside of Nuke. Alright, now that we've covered the UI basics, let's start building up a workflow. Workflows in Griptape are what we call our node setup. There's an unlimited amount of things you can use Griptape for, so workflows will vary hugely. But I'm going to show you the basics so you can do some experimentation and have enough information to go and build your own workflows. As we've already seen, you can click and drag nodes from the left sidebar into the node graph to add them into your workflow. So I'll add an agent for now. Agents are a huge part of building workflows in Griptape, as they can act as experts depending on what information and context you feed them. This means that they can be used to intelligently make decisions and enhance user inputs to get more detailed and accurate output. When arranging nodes and building up your workflows, the usual Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V to copy and paste, Ctrl+D to duplicate, click and drag to position, and your resize controls all apply here, so it should be pretty intuitive and quick to get used to. So with this agent, we can type something in and get a response in exactly the same way that we would using an AI chatbot, and you can choose which model you want to use from the drop-down at the top. You can either run nodes from the button in the top right of the node itself, or from the bar at the top of the UI, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Control and Enter while the node you want to run is selected. When it's running, you'll see in the top right corner that it is running, and then when it's finished, you'll see the output. You'll notice that on the nodes themselves, you also have a lock icon, so you can lock a node's parameters, and that will also prevent it from running. You can collapse down a node's display to hide the parameters for nodes that you don't want to touch. And you can also rename nodes for readability by clicking the pencil or by hitting R. In the bottom left of the canvas, we also have a few options here for things like zooming, fitting everything in view. You can also lock all of the nodes so that you can't move them or change their parameters. And you can toggle the clean view for the background. All right, let's start building out this workflow a little bit more. So you can bring in files like images or videos from your file browser directly into the node graph by dragging them in, and that will create a load image node in the same way as when we dragged our generated image in from the chat. So I've brought in this landscape shot, and I'm going to use an image generation model to change this landscape to look like it was taken at different times of the day or different times of the year. As well as dragging nodes over from the sidebar, you can also hit Tab or Shift A, or you can double click or right click to add a new node into the network. These will bring up the same floating menu, so you can choose which one you prefer to use. And this is really useful when you know exactly what node you want to use, as you can quickly search for it by name. So I can start typing image generation, and you'll see that there's a lot of options depending on the model that you want to use. So I'm going to try Nano Banana. And I can type in a prompt here, or I can get our agent to write a more detailed prompt and then connect that up. So let's do that now. I'm going to write a prompt for an image generation model to use to make the input image look like it was taken during the autumn without changing or adding anything else to the image. And I'll add output only the prompt so that we just get that prompt to hand over to the image gen model. And we can just run this to see the result. Using agents to enhance your prompts can be a really powerful tool in your workflows to get much better results. And you can guide the agents with rule sets and additional context to include whatever information you want to try and get the best outputs. So you can see that the result gives us some nice detail on lighting and color to fit the autumn time of year. And this is useful for guiding the image generation model. Then we can connect our agent's prompt by clicking and dragging the output from the agent node to the prompt input. And I'll also drag the image that I loaded in over to the input images point. These inputs and outputs are color-coded depending on the data type. For example, blue is text and red is an image input. So you can really easily see where connections can be made. If you need to disconnect the nodes, then you can hover over the connection line and click the red symbol, or you can click the connection and just hit delete. With these nodes connected up, we can then run this image gen node and get our result. So when you run a workflow like this with a number of connected up nodes, Griptape will first check if any previous connected nodes need resolving and resolve them first. So our agent is already resolved, so it will move on to this one and then run until it's complete. Now we have the image result, and we can just open this up bigger and take a look. And you can see it's done a pretty decent job of adjusting the lighting, changing the color of the leaves, and it's just pushing those yellow and orange tones to fit better with an image that would have been taken during autumn. It's also done quite a nice job of keeping the rest of the image the same in terms of composition and not adding anything weird. If I make a change to this agent input, so I'll just change it from autumn to winter, and then run the image gen node again, then this agent will run first, and the image gen node will wait until it's complete before starting. And then we'll have our totally different result because our prompt has changed. When it comes to deciding which nodes to process in which order, Griptape will either follow the default execution order, as it's done here, or it will follow overrides that you can put in place. So normally when you hit run on a workflow, the Griptape engine uses built-in rules to automatically figure out the dependencies and determine the execution order of the nodes. It looks at how the data is connected up and maps out what needs to finish processing before the next step can begin. In this case, we have a very simple setup, so we don't need to manually control the flow of data. But with more complex networks, or if you're unhappy with the automatic execution order, you can override the system's rules using the flow in and flow out connections at the very top of the nodes. I'll just make the workflow a bit bigger so we can see exactly how this works. So I'm going to add another image generation node. And I could use any of the other models that we have here, but I know that Nano Banana works really well for this, so I'm going to stick with that. But you can use whatever model works best for each job, and that's one of the benefits of AI orchestration over just using one model. So I'm just going to use this node to remove the fence from the image before we pass it over to the next one. And I'll quickly change that agent prompt again so everything is unresolved. So I'm just going to put during a storm instead of winter. And now we have these two streams to resolve before this node can be resolved. So again, if I run from here, the default execution order is resolving the agent first. I'll just cancel this for now using the button in the top bar. But if for whatever reason we wanted our initial image gen node to run first, then we can use the flow in and flow out connections to basically draw a line of order for the nodes to be executed, giving you really explicit control over the exact run order. So I'll just change the prompt again to something like during nighttime, so everything's unresolved. And then if I hit run, you'll see that the order of execution has changed to follow our defined flow. I'll speed up the video so you can see the results. The image gen nodes usually take less than a minute, so it's pretty quick. So you can see that it's first removed the fence, and then our agent has generated the prompt, and then those inputs have both passed over to the second image gen node to change it to a nighttime shot. In the engine settings, you can also switch the execution mode from the default, which is sequential, to parallel, which means that multiple nodes can run and be resolved simultaneously, so your workflow execution times will be faster. Do keep in mind that if you have any models running locally, then this will require more processing power to run them simultaneously. But for the most part, with models using an API, you shouldn't have that issue. I'll just talk a little bit more about the options you have for running workflows. So as well as the Run Node button, you also have the Start Flow from Here button, which will run the workflow from the selected node forwards. And it won't resolve anything beforehand, so it's important to bear in mind that if any nodes do need resolving first, then this could result in errors if they're not resolved. But if everything before here is already resolved, then you can just use this to resolve the rest of the workflow. And up at the top bar, you have the option to run the entire workflow, which will resolve all the nodes even if they're not connected. And you can also stop a workflow running at any point, as I just showed, using the Cancel Workflow Execution button. If you want to publish your workflow to the cloud, or to Nuke, or want to be able to run it through the terminal, then you're going to need to add start and end flow nodes, or the Nuke start and end flow nodes, to define the start and end point of your workflow. As you're building out your workflows, it's a good idea to use the display nodes like text, or video, or image as checkpoints in your node network. They make it a lot easier to see any outputs at each stage really nicely and clearly. And it also means you can disconnect any previous nodes as a way to avoid them re-resolving unnecessarily, while still keeping the output. So I can say I'm happy with the result here, where the fence has been removed, so I can add a display image node, and then I can disconnect this if I want, so I can just see the result nice and clearly. I could then organize this even further by creating a group for this section and naming it something like fence removal. And then I can collapse this node down, again, just to keep it looking nice and tidy. Using these display nodes also means that you can iterate and compare your outputs using nodes like the Compare Images node without losing any outputs that might have worked well along the way. You can also use save nodes in the same way to save out your images or videos or anything else to disk as a way of exporting final outputs from Griptape, but also for versioning and baking things so that you don't need to re-resolve entire networks, and also so you don't lose any outputs accidentally. If you save an output, then you can just drag it back into the node graph to load it back in and continue your workflow. There's a lot of other nodes and workflows you can experiment with, but the last thing I do want to cover in this video is for each loops. These are super useful for automating repetitive tasks and really quickly testing the same workflow across a list of items. For example, let's take this image output of our landscape, and say we want to view the same shot at different times of day or different seasons. So we can start with a create text list node and just add a few entries for different times. So I'll add autumn, winter, storm, nighttime, dusk, and sunrise. So what we want to do in our loop is merge each of these items with the rest of the prompt and then pass those complete prompts to the image generation model so we end up with 6 different images. So for this we can use a for each group. This group node is a consolidated looping structure with input and output points to control exactly what process is being looped. So I'll just expand this over the agent and the image generation node. And I'll just move this up here and reconnect our image. And when I connect this up, this will create an input point for our image because it's outside of the group. Now we want to input each of these items from the list into a prompt that will be fed into our agent. So for this, we can use a couple of text input nodes and a merge text node to bring all of this text together into one prompt. So what I'll do is take the original prompt from here and split it across the 2 text inputs, leaving the timeout as this will be input by the items from the list. So we'll end up with during autumn, during winter, and so on. And then we can plug these outputs into the merge text node. You could also type directly into the fields here, but it's quite useful for readability just to have things separate like this. For the list output, we need to plug this into the items input on the group. And then connect the current item from the list to the second input in our merge text. And then I can just plug the output from the merge text to the agent input. And I'm also just going to remove the new line formatting so that we have one complete sentence. And our agent is already connected up to the image gen node, so that's all fine. But the last thing to do is just connect the output from the image generation to the new item to add output on the group, so that it's going to add each output to a new result from the group. And then on the other side of the group, I'm going to use a display image grid to view all of our outputs together. So I'm going to change the columns to 3 so that we're going to have a 3x2 grid for our 6 different images. So when I run this now, the workflow will loop through each of those list items, again in parallel for maximum efficiency, so we get a new prompt for each one, which is passed to the image generation model to generate the 6 different image outputs. All of them are following that same input image and just looping through each of these different times to give us a different result. I'll speed this up again so we can see the process and all of the results. And remember that this workflow inside the loop can really be anything you want. So it could be iterating different looks and styles, viewing slap comps of a CG rendered asset against different environments, or batch generating 3D assets from an image. And once it's done, we can see all of the images in the grid. And I can choose how I want them displayed, and then open this up bigger so we can see the full results. So that covers an introduction into the basics of the Griptape Nodes UI and workflows. There's a lot more to explore, so you can check out some of our other videos and examples to dive a bit deeper.